Good morning, I'm Karen. Before I introduce Rich, you probably all know him as the Labour guy with the red scarf and the red tie, but actually Rich's a lot more than that, and he's a lovely, normal guy. Rich does everything we all do. He walks the dog, he does the food shopping, and he checks in with his mum on a weekly basis. Richard and I have been together for 20 odd years, and Richard's passion and belief in Labour and politics has never wavered. Some may say he's a bit too idealistic. Don't think so. Richard, he wants to change society. He wants to remove discrimination, he wants to eradicate poverty, and he wants to build a fair society. That's our Labour values that are necessary to do that. He's a decent, generous human being. His passion and his belief in politics has never come from books. It's come from real life experience. It's come from real people and real families. He believes and he understands that now is the time that we need a Labour Party in Scotland to build a better Scotland. That's my view. Rich Leonard, my husband and leader of the Scottish Labour Party.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you, Karen. Karen also dedicates her working life to fighting against injustice and for equality. She's there for me, and we're there for each other to face and get through life's challenges together. So thank you again. You know, when generations look back on 2020, they will look back on a defining year in Scotland's history. A global pandemic, the beginning of an economic crisis without parallel, the spectre of mass unemployment, levels of government intervention in Scotland's economy unprecedented in peacetime, but a government that has failed our most vulnerable older people living in care homes, and a government forced to fundamentally reconsider the exam system, stalling in the task, and our school students rising up and securing a U-turn to right the government's wrong. At the start of this year, I said that in 2020 we would face a choice. A choice whether we broaden our horizons or narrow them. Today, I am going to set out not just how we should broaden our horizons, I'm going to set out why we must broaden our horizons. In the past 6 months, we have seen governments take steps that they would have dismissed out of hand a year ago. We have witnessed a new intervention by politicians in the economy in a way that we would never have seen. And we hear those politicians say that they are doing things differently, but the truth is there is still far too much that has stayed the same. And even where changes have been made, the ground is already being prepared to return to the same old failed normal. And those same politicians still rely on the same rigid doctrines and outdated practices which left us unprepared for the public health crisis, unprepared for the education crisis, and unprepared for the economic crisis. So today, I am issuing a warning to Scotland's political establishment. Your old ways were never the answer, but the need to break with them is more urgent now than ever. It is time to fight for Scotland's future. And that is the fight that I will lead Scottish Labour into the 2021 elections to win. The fight for a fairer Scotland, a greener Scotland, a better Scotland. Before I set out the changes we need to make to our economy, I want to address something which is hugely personal to me and to many of you. Last weekend, thanks to an investigation by the Sunday Post newspaper, we learned for the first time the shocking news that hospital patients who had tested positive for COVID-19 were discharged into care homes. And we know the lived experience of people in care homes. Loved ones living in isolation, families unable to visit them for weeks, sometimes months, desperate to see them, meaning tragically, for some families, unable to say even a final farewell, a final hug, a final kiss. A precious time, a time that families will never get back. We know the pain because this is the experience of many families, and it is the experience of my own family. When I first spoke about my Uncle Ralph's death in a care home, I received many messages of sympathy, but I also received messages attacking me for even mentioning his death because he had died in a care home in England. I wish it was the case that here in Scotland, families with relatives in residential care had a better experience. I wish care home residents in Scotland had been better protected during this crisis. But we know that while only 0.7% of the population of Scotland live in care homes, around 50% of all COVID-19 deaths have been in Scotland's care homes. In fact, the situation is so bad that the Scottish Human Rights Commission had to call for the future COVID-19 public inquiry to investigate whether the fundamental human right to life of residents has been violated. For 2 months, I pushed for this, and now the First Minister has conceded it. But we need to go further, so that those who knowingly decided to transfer patients with COVID-19 into care homes, and those who knowingly took the decision to transfer patients to care homes in the full and certain knowledge that there was COVID-19 already present, must face justice, if necessary, in a court of law. We know that families are already considering bringing about prosecutions, and we will be on the side of those families in their pursuit of justice. It is time to accept once and for all that our fragmented care system is broken, that the profit motive and the shareholder dividend should have no place in it. In my view, that means we must establish a national care service with national standards for service users and staff. It means a new care service that can create 25,000 quality jobs, building a sustainable workforce that can care for our ageing population. Because never again can our care service be treated by government as a poor relation of the NHS. It is time to care about care and restore dignity to our care system. Never again can 15-minute visits be an acceptable standard of home care. Never again can precarious employment contracts mean a continued rotation of home carers. And never again can those people working to keep our care service running be left to languish on poverty pay. You know, the way that we value our older citizens says a lot about the kind of society that we are. And for Scottish Labour, a national care service that puts the dignity of our elderly at the heart of all decisions is a powerful expression of the new society, the fair economy, the post-COVID Scotland that we must create. Over the last 6 months, people across Scotland have got to know their neighbours, many times for the first occasion. Communities have come together, providing a helping hand to those in need. But too many families have seen changes for the worse. A deepening of poverty, a rise in inequality. those already in debt plunged even further into misery and to hardship. Those with limited personal savings have seen them wiped out. And so across the board, poverty and indebtedness is up, bringing new anxieties and new fears. Add to this that we are also on the brink of a massive rise in unemployment. We are witnessing the potential collapse of town centres all around us. Nighttime economies are in danger of going bust. Youth unemployment is at levels already not witnessed for decades. And so for many, little wonder that a feeling of uneasiness persists across the country. That's why we say that Boris Johnson's government must allow for flexibility in extending the job retention scheme in key sectors and in key areas. Too many people are having sleepless nights, living in fear of not having a job or a business to go back to. So this pandemic is not just a public health danger that takes the form of a physical threat, it takes the form of a mental health threat too. We also know that the pandemic has had an adverse and disproportionate impact on women. Unemployment amongst women in Scotland has increased by almost a half in the past year, which is why any Scottish Jobs Guarantee scheme should be open not just to young people, but to other people of working age disadvantaged by the economic lockdown. It must also offer more than the part-time, low-paid and short-term jobs and training that the Tory government's Kickstart scheme promises. Scotland needs a full-time, well-paid jobs guarantee that will equip people with skills that they can use for the rest of their working lives. And if the SNP government is genuinely interested in developing such a quality jobs guarantee scheme, we will work with them to deliver it. But that must include a rate of pay based on at least the real living wage. So the creation of a national care service and the urgent introduction of a quality Scottish jobs guarantee scheme must be part of a post-lockdown alternative programme for government. And there are a few other radical steps I would like to see. Make no mistake, jobs will be critical. Jobs must be the economic priority. Job guarantees, job retention and job creation. Thousands of people in Scotland face losing their jobs, and as debts rise, many will fall into rent arrears. But the SNP government has not banned evictions, only delayed them. Which is why today I am calling on the Scottish Government to introduce a ban on evictions for the remainder of this Parliament. And I am also calling again on the SNP government to reconsider its opposition to Pauline McNeill's Fair Rents Bill. They should ask themselves if continuing to join forces with the Tories to block the bill from making it onto the statute book really puts them on the right side of history. Daniel Johnson's bill to protect retail workers has a universal and an enduring application, but its necessity has been brought into sharp relief by the experience of shop workers during this pandemic. They have been heroes too. That bill should be in the programme for government. Period poverty will increase, making Monica Lennon's bill to eradicate period poverty truly transformational, and so truly a priority for the Parliament to use its powers to pass this year. And on the subject of bills, we need a Parliament focused on the job in hand. That's why Neil Findlay's double jobbing bill is so important. People want politicians who are on their side, not someone more interested in catching footballers who are offside. We know as well that we are seeing more families slide into food poverty, which makes Elaine Smith's bill to enshrine the right to food in law all the more important. And today, I am calling for the programme for government next month to contain a commitment to bring forward the Scottish child payment of £10 per child per week sooner than next February. We think that the time has also come for a Community Wealth Building Act to stimulate more local initiatives like the one launched this year in North Ayrshire, so that we start to use public procurement to boost local economies, not big corporations, so that we support worker ownership and cooperatives as a viable option to refloat businesses as we come out of lockdown. Because why on earth shouldn't the people who create the wealth own the wealth that they create? It would mean greater community ownership of land as well, because land reform remains an important chapter of unfinished business for the Scottish Parliament. A community wealth building approach to reduce inequality, to spread democracy and to reinvest in local communities and local people. That is what is needed. It is an economy that has to be reimagined with a renewed emphasis on investing in and so diversifying our manufacturing base and the skills of our people. As the climate and ecological crisis continues to escalate, 2020 must also mark a turning point in the direction of Scotland's economy and its environmental impact. We simply cannot afford to return to business as usual. Instead, a green and just recovery must focus on tackling the economic crisis and the climate crisis at the same time. And that's why earlier this year I asked the economist Laurie McFarlane to draw up a report with recommendations for a Scottish Labour Green New Deal. In Scotland, we are blessed with an abundance of natural resources. We also have the will to change and to make things better. So we must bring together all sectors and all sections of our society, harnessing all our natural resources, all our workforce skills, and all of our ambition to create a greener, better future for us all. Scotland has a housing crisis which stretches back before the pandemic. Too many people are stuck on never-ending housing waiting lists, losing hope by the day. Too many young people with no prospect of having their own home outside of the private rented sector, and too many children going to sleep at night in damp and overcrowded accommodation. So we will build 12,000 council homes each year to the highest energy efficiency standards. And to carry out this work, we will establish a new Land and Communities Development Agency to employ and train thousands of new workers. We will improve all of Scotland's homes to reach at least Energy Performance Certificate C energy efficiency standard by 2030, and we will be zero carbon by 2045. A safe, warm, affordable home should be the right of every person, and Labour's Homes Plan will make that human right a reality in Scotland. We should also set a target for expanding Scotland's domestic renewable energy production to meet 200% of our own electricity needs by 2030. This will ensure that we are ready for a future increase in demand and can be a net exporter to the rest of the UK. But I have always been clear that when reviewing energy, we must ensure that there is a just transition for workers and communities. To do this, we must establish a £500 million Just Transition Fund to assist workers and businesses with the realities of transition. And we must create a new Scottish National Energy Development Agency to coordinate the development of renewable energy infrastructure, generation and local supply chains so that we get the jobs dividend here. Working with experts such as Scottish Carbon Capture and Storage, learning from the world-leading work at Heriot-Watt University. We must focus on carbon capture, maximising Scotland's potential to become a European leader in CO2 management with a state-owned carbon capture company. But we can't just use up our natural resources, we must replenish and look after them as well. That's why we must have a major reforestation plan and a plan to restore degraded peatland every year for the next quarter of a century. And to do this, we must employ and train a new workforce dedicated to restoring Scotland's natural environment and meeting our climate commitments. Just yesterday, ADL in Falkirk announced 160 job cuts. At the very point when a modern moving Scotland needs a modern public transport system, these jobs are at risk. So we must expand Scotland's bus network by investing £100 million in buying new electric buses from domestic manufacturers like ADL. I want also to reaffirm Scottish Labour's commitment to not only retain the over 60s bus pass, but to provide free bus passes for the under 25s, with the ultimate ambition to expand this to everyone of all age. We know that encouraging the habit of using public transport when people are young is more likely to result in a lifelong habit of public transport use, reducing future car miles and so emissions. However, we do also understand that some people will still need and want to drive. So to ensure this, much more can be done to make this environmentally friendly. So we believe we need to invest £200 million in rolling out electric vehicle charging points. Housing, energy, infrastructure, environmental restoration and transport. These our bold plans would create in total up to 131,000 new jobs. With careful planning involving businesses, trade unions and government, with the right investment, we can create sustainable jobs in all parts of the country, staving off the imminent and real threat of mass unemployment. We can retain jobs, guarantee jobs, we can create jobs. We can move away from the low-paid, insecure work and towards the sectors of the future, such as those that are necessary to decarbonise the economy. Not only will this create apprenticeships and jobs for our young people, but it will provide retraining opportunities for all working people so that they have the skills and experience to help build the Scotland of the future. And people will say, how will you pay for this? To them I say, the Scottish Parliament needs borrowing powers to provide the investment that is required now. And we demand that Scotland gets its £800 million per year share from the current UK net contribution to the EU. That should go to the Scottish Parliament's budget, in addition to Barnett formula consequentials. And lastly, we must draw down on the benefit of being part of a stable and credible monetary union. We are backing the IMF's call for countries with, to use their words, fiscal space to run deficits to promote growth. The OBR reported last month, and I quote them, "One silver lining to the current fiscal cloud is that it remains relatively cheap for the government to borrow, and indeed it has become more so." So my call today is that Boris Johnson's government must unleash the monetary firepower to stimulate Scotland's economy. In 2020, we have seen the need for a brighter vision of the future, based on Communities United. And as we look to the next programme for government, we believe that it is the task, that it is the responsibility not just of this current Parliament and this current government, but of the next Parliament and of the next Scottish Government, to build a better future, to put Scotland's economy on a different path, to make full employment a central goal of public policy once more, to put people and planet first. We cannot just talk about Scotland's future. It's time to fight for Scotland's future. Let me end with this final thought. We are regularly told that we will emerge from this pandemic stronger. And I hope that we do. But I say that we must never ever forget those wonderful friends and those deeply missed relatives who we have lost over the last 6 months. It is to their memory, it is in their name that we fight for this better future for Scotland. That is our duty. That is the call of these times to us. Let us answer that call and let us rise to that challenge. Thank you.
Our system has not been working, and the current COVID situation has highlighted just how much it has failed us. For many young people, precarious jobs that are underpaid with little in the ways of quality working conditions are all that we have. Then we have the people of colour who are less likely to be employed than their white counterparts.
The amount of young people who've been pushed into precarious work like delivery drivers, 0 hours contracts in the healthcare, cleaning, social care industries. A lot of those people have been really hit hard by this pandemic and are being treated very unfairly by their employers who know that there's not a lot of job security at the moment and not much prospect of getting new jobs.
I want to speak to you quickly about Labour's plan Jobs for Good. It is important at this moment in time, especially after all we've seen over the pandemic, that our young people have capability of getting jobs that will stay permanent and allow them to have a future where they don't feel insecure.
I recently heard a member of senior management refer to those facing redundancy during the COVID crisis as part of the normal churn. Now, I don't think that's acceptable. I'm going to be unemployed at the end of this month. So, solidarity with all workers.
We need Richard Leonard's new policies to ensure safe, secure employment for young people in a time where workers are losing their jobs by the thousands due to coronavirus or being forced back into unsafe workplaces, putting their health at risk. Many of my friends have been put out of work as the furlough scheme comes to an end and are struggling to pay their rent. I worry that many more young people will be joining them as the mess that the Tories and SNP have made of exam marks have cost them a chance at social mobility.
I worked in the health service for many years. I've seen firsthand what a Cinderella service social care has become. We pay workers in social care very poorly, and the vulnerable in society are shortchanged by the ever-growing budget cuts.
Staff would not have to run shifts with less than the necessary number of staff on, and we'd have time to actually do our job. Carers want to care. We want to be able to spend quality time with service users and not have to rush to the next job in the name of profit for a select few.
The time is now to take the care sector back to being publicly run and out of the hands of private providers. I want those in the care sector to be afforded the same protections, wage structures and career progressions as my NHS colleagues, and with staffing levels and buildings fit for purpose and not for profit. It should be about the value of care and about those who care, not about profit.
For me, a national care service is important because it's important for people like my granddad. He's 81 years old, recently widowed. He relies on carers 4 times a day to help him stay independent and to live his best life. But these carers are too often overworked, underpaid and have terrible conditions. They deserve better and he deserves better. And that's why a national care service is so important to people like my papa.
The unions had to step in to provide PPE, testing, clinical governance and contingency plans, and this cannot continue for our most vulnerable citizens. We really welcome that Richard and the Labour Party are opening the debate about a national care service and what that might look like for all.
And so many of these private run day centres and respite centres are being shut down or having their spaces lowered and lowered and lowered, and it's shown just how valuable a national care service would be and how accessible it would make these services for so many people. That's why I fully support Richard's call for a national care service in Scotland.